Hi there. Welcome to another edition of Cambridge Inside Out. I'm still Robert Winters.
Hello, still. I'm Susana Segat, co-host, and we have a special guest today.
Hi, I'm Brian Corr.
Hi, Brian.
And Brian, who's a good friend and neighbor, actually is a man of many hats.
Yes. I'm just the man that says no not quite enough times.
There we go.
Every so often I say yes to something.
All right.
And that's why he's here today.
That's right.
That's right. Actually, before we dive in and pick apart Brian's life, any kind of big items. Actually, one of those big item is certainly worth noting was that Cambridgeport suffered a huge 9-alarm fire the other day, and I think it's 29 people are displaced. 3 buildings burned on Alston Street, and the Mayor David Marr, has in fact set up a protocol for if people want to make donations, either financial donations or donations of goods. A lot of the people who were limited resources to begin with, so they're really kind of in a tough shape now. So the best way to do that is probably just to go contact through the mayor's office, through one of several ways that you can do that. But it was a big fire. It woke me up actually in the morning, even though I'm in mid-Cambridge, and it was so big that people were reporting that they could smell the fire from Everett. Yeah, so it was no joke. So anyway, hope those folks make out okay. Any other big items floating around?
Well, you know what today is?
What is today?
Today is almost the end of the month.
Almost the end of the month.
Yep,
Yes.
July 31 is a big day at the State House.
How so?
It's the last day for formal sessions. So that means...
So after that, they don't have to wear ties?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Which means that all the work they didn't do in the last 2 years, they're doing today and tomorrow.
Really?
Yeah.
This reminds me of my students when I have a homework assignment due. And it's
Just
like,
the same.
right. Oh, I see.
So today they were vigorously passing bills right and left, vigorously overriding the governor's vetoes of the budget.
That's right.
And tomorrow is going to be a long day. So
There we go.
it's very exciting out there.
Right. And actually,
Big news.
yes.
The governor signed a new bill that, I don't know why these bills keep coming up, but
Susana is the pipeline for all the really
of the
important
weird ones. The weird
esoteric
ones are mine.
bills. Yeah.
Okay, so the new law will allow liquor stores to sell alcohol starting at 10 a.m. on Sunday instead of noon.
All
You're
right.
welcome.
Okay. The blue laws continue to be eroded.
Right. And what was it not so long ago? They passed some bill that allowed for mail order
Liquor.
liquor.
Yeah.
So
The bad news is that they did not attach an emergency preamble to it.
oh no?
No, that means it's not an emergency, so it will take 90 days for this law to take effect. So do not go to the liquor store this Sunday at 10 a.m. and try to buy alcohol. Wait 90 days and then go at 10 a.m.
Or you could go at noon.
Or you
There you go.
you can go at noon.
So really,
So these are the big laws that affect all of us.
where else can you go for this legislative education? Honestly, but Cambridge
So these
Insider.
bills that really matter to our day-to-day life.
All right. Pretty good.
You're welcome.
All right. Actually, I'll tell you another quick thing here, too. I assume you're here for the whole hour, just in case I start winding down here a little bit.
Uh-oh.
Last night was the big midsummer city council meeting.
Oh,
July
I missed
28th.
it. What happened?
Well, we'll
How
talk
long
about
was
a
it,
little bit
first
about
of all?
it. It went till the city council meetings by ordinance are supposed to, or by rules, are supposed to go no later than midnight. And they rarely have in recent years, so they actually had to go over about 10 minutes last night.
So they met from 6 to...
5:30 to about 12:10 a.m.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of public comment, as
Good.
might be expected, because it's the one bite at the apple during the summer. And they won't be back until a week or so into September. There'll be some committee meetings and whatnot, but as far as the regular council meetings, not until September. So, yeah, there was a lot going on, a lot of orders, a lot of resolutions, and a lot of discussions. So, let's see. And
Anything happen?
Well, yeah, I suppose. Oh, you want to know?
Not really.
Well, I mean, there were some things that are somewhat controversial. There was an order that is being characterized by many as something of a substitute for the Carlone petition, even though it's not officially a substitute. It was Order 17 last night, which basically calls for getting a group together to suggest some procedural changes for the way the planning board works, but without in any way suggesting changing who holds the authority to grant special permits. Speaking of Carlone petition, tomorrow at 4 o'clock is the ordinance committee meeting, in which that's actually the subject of the meeting. And I believe on August 5th.
There's another one, right?
I think it's the August 5th, the planning board will also take up that issue. Tonight is actually very exciting. It's a very exciting week on the civic landscape, to be sure. Tonight is the, down in East Cambridge, the planning board is meeting to take up the 40 Thorndike Street special permit, better known as the former Edward J. Sullivan Courthouse. My understanding is they will not be taking a vote tonight, but they will have a lot of information, new information, and a lot of public comment. And there's been a lot of canvassing to sort of bring everybody and his uncle out to the meeting, so it'll be hilarious. I'm going to go there, but I probably won't stay, but it'll probably go on.
Just say it will be hilarious.
Yeah, well, I mean, you
We
know,
need to go.
there is, I mean, it's a serious matter. I'm not trying to belittle that, but the thing is that sometimes public meetings, when there's a big hot topic, and, you know, it's a bit of political theater
Oh, I
that
see
goes
what you
on,
mean.
and I think this one will have a little bit of all of that,
I see.
to be sure.
Well, there's a lot of passions involved in
It's
this.
a lot of passions and no good solutions.
Yeah.
I think pretty much every possible outcome is going to be something that nobody's going to love, so.
Wow, your definition of comedy is really different from
Oh,
mine.
you know, I come from a weird tradition, what can I say? I grew up on the National Lampoon. So, anyway, getting back to our, now that
Now
I've
we've done the
ranted
important
for a
things.
while.
Well, what I wanted to mention is that in the last show, which I'm sure you've all watched, we were talking about the Cambridge Police Review and Advisory Board call for board members.
Right.
And the reason we got this information is because Brian puts out an email alert that is really consistent and informative and interesting. So it's worth your while to get on his email list. So
And
can
this
you
is-
talk to us about your email list a little bit before we, that
Sure.
way, put a plug in for that for you?
Okay, well, one of the things that I do in my role as director of the Peace Commission is work to keep the community informed about different issues. I try not to send too many emails out because I know we all get a lot of email, and I do work to make them hopefully informative and timely. And certain things that go out are things like we need members for the Police Review and Advisory Board. We actually need one member. One person has finished up her time in Cambridge, so we have an opening. The deadline is actually going to be,
Was there a time limit on how long you can stay in Cambridge?
well, no.
Oh,
no,
maybe I
she,
misheard
she
what you
has,
said.
she's no
Oh, I
longer in
see.
Cambridge.
Oh my
No.
Lord, I'm way overdue.
I know,
No. Well, you know,
My
if you're
time
not
is-
born here, you only
That's
get
right.
30 years.
I know, you gotta really work it in.
But so we do have an opening. I'll say a little bit more about that in a bit.
All right.
But if you want to get on my email list, it's actually very easy. You can just email the office at peace@cambridgema.gov. That's
say that again,
peace,
like peace.
P-E-A-C-E, at cambridgema.gov.
All right, so you're talking about a vacancy on the Peace Commission?
No, this is
Or
on the Police Review and Advisory Board.
Okay, see,
But-
that's one of the things that makes things
Yeah.
difficult.
Is
You
it
confuse
I
us.
have two hats at the
No,
city.
you've got more than two hats, but, well, two hats at the
At the
city.
city,
At the
yes.
city, right, so you are Executive Secretary of the Cambridge Police Review and Advisory Board
That's right.
and Executive Director of the Peace Commission. What's the difference between an Executive Secretary and
What?
an Executive?
Does that mean you get two checks, two paychecks?
No, it doesn't mean I get two checks.
Two
It
half
means I
checks.
just have to do
You just
two
gotta take
sets
them
of
back
things.
together.
No, it's just, you know, it's that sort of thing. You can have multiple roles, but only get one paycheck
That's
generally.
the way, that's the way it works.
You know, at least in Cambridge. So I am the department head in city terms of both departments.
Right.
And with the Peace Commission, the title that was given was Executive Director, which is fairly typical. With the Police Review and Advisory Board, I think they chose Executive Secretary just because the nature of these kind of legal boards and things.
Oh, I see.
You're the secretary to the board.
Right.
Exactly. So I
Alright.
work to make sure they're able to do what they need to do. They have the materials they need. We take in complaints that they will make decisions on, but we have to manage the cases and do the work in terms of intakes, investigating all of that. So.
All right. Now, so the vacancy is, the deadline for applying is
July 31st, so
this
that's
Thursday.
Thursday.
So 2 days
And that's
from
for
now.
the police review and
Oh,
advisory
here, I have
board.
a camera here that can
Yeah,
show that.
okay.
Oh,
All right.
we have all sorts of exciting
This is-
technology here.
this is- I'm
That's
the
right. That's
This
right.
is a
camera person.
5.2x optical
Oops,
zoom.
that's not it.
No,
There it
okay.
is.
There we go. See?
That's
Police
it.
Review Advisory Board. All right. I think people kind of got that from the oral part of the program, but you know,
Some people are visual learners.
you're right. You're absolutely right. We aim to please all. Now, Police Review Advisory Board. I just have a few
Oh, this is
basic
good.
core questions for those, partly out of my own curiosity, but also I think people who may not know about it.
Mhm.
I mean, Police Review Advisory Boards have been, it was correct me if I'm wrong,
Mhm.
it was an idea that became popularized, maybe was it in the 1970s or maybe even earlier?
Actually, later for the most
Later,
part.
really? Okay. But it happens in many, many cities, larger cities for the most part.
Mhm.
And, New York City has a history of them. Cambridge Police Review Advisory Board was established in when?
Now you're going to kid. I believe it was
Oh.
1980.
You didn't know there was gonna be a quiz.
I know, I didn't prepare the dates piece. I believe
Alright.
it was 1984. I'm almost certain.
All right, we'll go with that. That's pretty
That's
close
a good
enough.
date.
It is about that, though.
No one's gonna check.
Right.
Oh, yes, they will.
You will. That's right.
It's on my website.
There we
So.
go. Right.
No one will know.
Right. And, for the most part,
We'll fire the speech writers.
There you go.
now officially, the role or roles of the Police Review and Advisory Board are?
The board has been established to take in and investigate complaints of misconduct by the police. And those complaints can come from civilians, or they can actually come from other police or members of the department. And it also serves to advise the city manager and the police commissioner on issues of policy, procedure, practices of the police. And ultimately, its role is advisory. There are numerous ways that civilian oversight can function. Our role is to advise the city manager and the police commissioner, and we review complaints. So our role is advisory. There are various types of police commissions in different communities. Some are completely advisory, some have more of an auditing role where they constantly are looking at cases that the police have and looking for issues or problems the same way you do financial auditing. Some are actually ombuds, ombudsmen, ombudspersons, ombuds, who are there for taking complaints in and are completely independent. Some are simply the internal affairs people doing the investigation. So there is a wide range just in the United States.
And sometimes there's a bit of a kind of a conflict when you have internal affairs within a police department and a civilian police review. I think in New
There
York
can
City,
be.
they always very emphatically refer to it as the Civilian Police Review Advisory
Right.
Board. And there
It's
can
a
be some
civilian
conflicts.
complaint review board in New York
Right.
City, the CCRB.
Right. Now, does the Cambridge Police Review Advisory Board have subpoena power?
It does have subpoena power through the office of the city solicitor.
All
In my time in the position, which has been over 3 years, we've never had to do that. We have a good working relationship with the police. We definitely are, I wouldn't say adversarial, but we're outside of the police. We're looking with the eyes of civilians, especially the 5 members of the board, at their practices, how they do things and incidents. But they have an understanding that in order to be effective at policing, they have to have the trust of the community. And in our society, no matter how good a police department might be, there are always issues of trust and mistrust. Whether in this community or others, people have had negative experiences with police. People hear stories, and people certainly wonder if the police are doing everything they can, if they're as thorough as they can be. So part of our role is to make sure that there are civilians who are engaged in looking at the work of the police. Again, around specific complaints, but also more generally around how the police are doing things, what their policies are, how they approach issues like racial profiling and biased policing.
Now, if a person did have some concern, whether it's a small concern, medium, or giant concern about police misconduct, or just some strong feelings about how things should better be done within the police department, how do they initiate a complaint or, sort of get the ball rolling?
Oh, it's a great question. We do our best to make it easy. People can call us on the phone, they can send an email, they can come into our office with which people often do.
Where is your office?
We're at 51 Inman Street, which is the same building as the Election Commission and many of the Department of Human Service Programs offices. It's kind of halfway between Inman Square and Central Square on Inman Street. And we're there generally the regular hours, although it never hurts to call just in case someone's not in the office for some reason. But people can come in, sit down with us, talk about what they've experienced. They can call on the phone. And again, people can file a formal complaint. People can simply make an inquiry if they're not sure if something was handled appropriately or if they have a question about why something happened. People can make complaints on behalf of another party, although generally the board will consider complaints that come from an individual as opposed to, hey, I think somebody did something.
Right.
But again, we take all information in. Any issues, concerns, problems, questions people have, we want to know. And my experience has been that the police department internal affairs people, which we call the professional standards unit, they also want to know. In the end, not every complaint we get turns out to be something where police violated policies and procedures. But if people come away from an interaction with the police department and they're not satisfied, it's very important that we know. And sometimes things that wouldn't rise to the level of misconduct or even a violation of policy or procedure, they do bring up something that should be changed in terms of how the police handle situations, in terms of training needs, or in some cases even in terms of making sure the public understands what the police are trying to do when they're doing their job, and making sure that the police are communicating effectively what actions they're taking, why they're taking them, and what reasons they've had to take them in the first place.
It gives people a voice, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So usually when you have a board, you try to figure out what people's strengths are and what skills they
Mhm.
have and what's missing. So for people watching who might
Mm.
want to apply to be on the Police Review and Advisory Board, what are you looking for? What's missing in this board? What do you need? Or are you all set and anyone can apply? Who should apply for this?
Well, that's a great question, too. I would say, first, anyone can apply. Part of what we do as a board, when we work with the board, and this is really through the city manager's office, I don't make these decisions, is we want our boards and commissions to be as diverse as possible. Again, we have a 5-member board, so there are limits to that diversity, but we look to have a mix of people by gender, race, ethnic background, religious background, parts of the city. Obviously, we can't do all of that in 5 people, so we are looking for all sorts of people. And I'll also say that we want people who can be unbiased, who can come in without preconceptions about the police are always doing a great job and people are just whining, or the police are terrible and we know that they're not accountable to anyone. We really want people who can look at the facts of a case and make a good analysis from what they've seen and what they understand. We do a lot of training as well with members of the board so that they understand how the police are supposed to work in order to be able to judge if they're working properly.
By the way, that dedication to impartiality, that may not apply to all advisory committees, but certainly anything that has regulatory authority, planning board, things like that, that's exactly the right advice for all of them.
Yeah.
No, I think so.
You'd be
It's-
frustrated if you didn't have
Yeah,
that.
there's a place for
Absolutely.
advocacy in cities and in city boards and commissions, but I think with these ones here, you've got to be absolute straight shooter.
Yeah.
No, it's true. And even though our role is advisory, we don't have the ability to discipline a police officer, to fire a police officer. Our recommendations, I believe, are taken very seriously. So it's important that everyone involved, the public and the police department, feel that people are impartial and reasonable. So I'm not trying to avoid your original question, but the other piece
Well, that's
is...
a good answer.
Yeah, overall, we're looking for anyone. The person who has left our board, I'll say, has a background in violence prevention, and that's been valuable because it's someone who has worked with the police department in that capacity, and both has a sense of how they do things, how they ought to do things, but has seen some things that maybe could have been done better over the years. So anyone that's got that kind of experience definitely should be thinking about applying. But even someone who doesn't have any particular interest in policing issues, please do feel free to apply, because we want to have a broad, diverse people applying so that when the city manager's office and city manager look at the people who've applied and make a choice, they're able to really see that we're getting a representative group of people from the community, and then ensure that the board itself is as representative as it can be within the role and mission and function of the board.
So how busy are they? How often do they meet? How many
Uh,
cases have you seen in 3 years?
Well, the board meets generally once a month. This part of the year, it's a little challenging, so we usually
Yeah.
don't have a meeting of the board in July and August. And the regular meeting date is the last Wednesday, not the fourth Wednesday, but the last Wednesday of the month. The other exception is November, December, with all the holidays. The board generally meets the first Wednesday in December, as opposed to the last Wednesday of December and the last Wednesday of November. So we have 9 regular meetings. I'd say in a given year, there may be 1 or 2, occasionally 3 special meetings that are called because of scheduling issues or because of something that's come up. And in addition to that, as I said, we do training with the board. So board members are asked to go out with the police and do what we call walk-alongs and ride-alongs, where they simply shadow a police officer in the vehicle or
I
on
bet
the
that's
street.
fun.
It can be fun, it can be eye-opening.
And certainly
That's my idea of
educational.
fun.
Right.
And, if you really want to see a lot of action, go out on a Friday night at about 11 o'clock in Central Square.
Yeah, definitely.
So
No,
those
that's
sorts
not
of
that
things.
much
By the way,
fun.
Commissioner Haas at the city council meeting, he was very impressive. He's always impressive. I think we're very blessed to have Robert Haas as commissioner here. But, he was quoting statistics. There's perceptions of lack of safety or high crime rate in places like Central Square. And he just comes flat out and says, nope, that may be perceived that way, but in fact, crime by and large has been declining. And, so anyway, it's sort of good to hear it. Definitely.
And the other piece of your question, how many cases do we see? And that's a good question. People always want to know that. In my time, I'd say it's average between complaints that go to the police and to the Police Review and Advisory Board, a couple of dozen, which I always say to people, sometimes people think, oh, that must mean you're not doing a good job or no one trusts you. Other people say, you guys must have a really great city. My sense is that most people who have a concern do feel they can come forward, and my experience has been that people do feel that the board is a good resource. I say to people, if you think something has happened and you're not sure, come to us. We really encourage everyone to come forward and speak to us. And I'm also part of a national organization, the National Association for the Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. And that's, I won't say trade association, but it's a national association of groups like, and organization, or offices like the Police Review and Advisory Board. And there are over 100 entities around the country that are part of that. And things really do vary. But I will say that when I speak to my colleagues in other cities, even cities of sort of similar size and profile like Berkeley, they do have far more complaints about use of force. One of the things that they see in many communities that we rarely see in Cambridge over the years is officer-involved shootings. Some place like San Francisco has officer-involved shootings, every week or two, and sometimes. So overall, the sense is that the police are not generating a lot of complaints, but certainly any concerns people have, please do come forward, because we want to hear those and address whatever has happened.
Now, the last time, because this is your second time with us.
It's true, I'm a repeat, a retread.
This is not a rerun, but Brian has been back. I think we talked a little bit more about your role, your other half job, which was at the head of the Peace Commission.
That's right.
I thought we were gonna save that for the second half hour.
Well, we could do that
All
too.
right, go ahead.
We could sort of do a little bit of this and sort of carry over here. But
We're fighting over you.
I can't complain about people fighting over me in that sense. As long as it's peaceful fighting. Otherwise, we'll have to do some mediation, restorative justice
Oh, that'd
practices.
be nice to see that.
We'd have a
Oh, I love
3-person
that.
peace
We could
circle.
do a training.
Yeah.
That's true.
Part of the reason why I was
Love
bringing it
that.
up, just sort of hot on the heels of the Police Review Advisory Board, is that I know that when there have been sort of terrible incidents around the city, things like recently there was a murder of a young man on Windsor Street. Sometimes the people from the Peace Commission have sort of been on the scene in one form or another. So are there any roles that the Peace Commission plays that are sort of relate to violence prevention or things that are in some sense or other related to things that we often associate with police?
That's a very good question as well. The Peace Commission, and in a sense the Peace Commission was it's a small department really.
Right.
So really it's through me, sits on what's called the Community Response Network Steering Committee. And that's a collaborative group
Community response.
network.
Okay.
And it's a steering committee for the Community Response Network.
Okay.
And the Community Response Network is composed of the police department, human services programs, the school department, the public health department, and the Peace Commission. And so we meet on a regular basis to look at issues about violence prevention, making sure that the resources are in place in case of traumatic events. But when things do happen, such as the unfortunate murder of Kensley David, the murder of Charlene Holmes, and in fact, all of the different things that happened around the Boston Marathon bombing, and all the multiple dimensions that that had in Cambridge, from the accused bombers being graduates of Ringe and Latin High School, to Officer Sean Collier, to the shelter-in-place, lockdown, depending on people's point of view, that happened. All of those things had a really strong impact on the community, and especially at Cambridge Ringe and Latin High School.
Yeah.
So the Peace Commission has been part of that group, and I certainly don't want to overplay my role or that of the Peace Commission, because you've got these major departments that have lots of resources and are really there every day working with young people, people of all ages in the community. But the Peace Commission does play a role, especially in what we would call compassionate witness, helping the community to heal in the wake of these events, helping people to come together across lines of difference or perceived lines of difference. One good example is after the marathon bombing happened, the Cambridge Black Pastors Alliance called for a vigil, and we were able to work with them to help that happen in front of City Hall. And that was before that Friday. I think that was on Wednesday. So it was a couple of days after the marathon. And people were still just so shaken up. They couldn't believe this had happened anywhere near their community. And it was a really good chance for people to come out and just stand together with candles in front of City Hall. And
Well,
it's...
Now, hold that thought,
Yes.
because we're going to have to run away. And we'll be
Three
back in
minute
3
break.
minutes. So until then, this is Cambridge Inside Out.